Initially, I started to write a story completely different than Grace. I was actually writing a story about a homeless man, and while I was in the process of writing this and doing research, I was speaking to a social worker who told me about an interesting phenomenon that happened in the United States back in the late 50s, early 60s, where there were thousands of girls on the streets, good girls, that were just running away, and in those days in child welfare, they didn't know why. It was this strange phenomenon. Of course, today we could figure that out, that they were being abused at home and they were looking for someplace safer. And since at that time our society chose not to recognize that child abuse existed and did not take responsibility for it, that we just let it happen in the homes, these kids had no place to go. Grace is the story of one of those children. I chose to set Grace in 1962 for a couple reasons. First of all, the cultural climate was correct for it. Today, if a child is abused, they have places to go, there's resources, people they can call, and someone will do something about it. In 1962, these children really had no place to go, and so they would find it to actually be safer to be on the streets than in their own home, which is a very sad thought when you think about it. The other thing is that it was such an interesting age. We were, as a culture, somewhat naive, and yet we had nuclear weapons. And so we watched this incredible chance that the human species might be destroyed, annihilated. And yet I have this girl who is in the back of a clubhouse in a little home in Salt Lake City. That she's facing her own threats that are, to her, equally great. There is hope in every circumstance, and in this case, the hope really comes from love. And what made it so fun to write, I think fun to read, is that it's a young man named Eric who is discovering love for the first time as he meets this girl who's a couple years older than him, and as we watch him become a man through this process, but also learning what it means to love and to sacrifice and to give. And in that relationship, in that love story, I think we always find hope and redemption. With our work with the Christmas Box House, we've dealt with thousands of abused children, and I hear their stories, and it really, on some levels, wasn't that difficult to kind of get into her mindset, where she's coming from. I think the timing of the story, as one reporter said to me, is perfect. We need a story about hope. We need to pull back to each other in times where there's a lot of uncertainty right now, and we have a lot of fear. And yet, to look back during the times of the Cuban Missile Crisis, their fear was that they wouldn't wake up in the morning, that their whole world would be destroyed, literally. And so, as we look at economic problems, it's not as bad. That's not what we're facing. And as frightening as it may be, they had it worse. And so I think it puts things in perspective.